I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
We are the CRM players, and yeah, you should be telling us this at this point because we've said it way so many times.
Yeah, but we've had, well, actually only a week. Never mind. I was going to say we had so much time to not do the show that we could have forgotten. But
Well, last week
yeah,
we ran the encore presentation. Actually, it really wasn't an encore because it was just recorded, so nobody really saw it.
that's right. So
Yeah.
we had
So
two shows last week. So we're overdone.
we did two shows. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, the Wednesday on live at CCE, live from CCE half.
Yeah, that the cavalcade.
That's
Um,
right.
People running in and out. But wow, we have a bit of an upset because our moment is Finn is a moment of LinkedIn user, whoever that
Who
is.
is that? Put your name in so we can see who you are. Who is upended Sven this week?
Oh, look, and then Sven is, oh my God,
Whoa!
it's got to be Russian or something, right? Because I see something that looks like
No,
an RUX, so I immediately think Russian for some reason.
no. This to me, this looks more
Is it
like
Pig Latin?
bebop language. It's
Skidity,
it's exactly.
wow.
It's more like scat. It's it's in scat. It's it's doing scat. Waxe ruxaya u wada saxida. This one, wow. Sudawa
That's a long one too.
Saxabayal.
All right, Sven.
Uh,
Do you have a guess?
Sven,
Do you guess on that one?
it's scat, Malaysian, or a dialect of or Afrikaans. No, it's not Afrikaans, but scat Malaysian or hey Bob, you
So that was
upended Sven for today.
yeah,
We had a
Bob.
moment of Bob.
Well, we're gonna make it a short one since it's Bob, but that's besides the point.
Um,
Somalia,
Somalian. I said
P-
African, but I didn't. It wasn't what I thought.
PPN
PPN
is
is rocking and dry.
the right exchange. Welcome, friends.
Wow! Congrats, Sven. You've regained your moment, man, with that one.
That's right.
Somalian.
And once
Somalian.
again, the moment is Finn is brought to you by well, nobody because we don't have any sponsor for that. But
Yes, well, someday we will. Next year, you'll be seeing the moment of Sven is brought to you by a fill-in vendor who sponsored the moment.
it's Finn.
It's brought to you by SAP, right? So next year, by Sven.
Anyway, we're glad to be back because it has been two straight Thursdays without a live show. So glad to be back. Yeah, we got a guest. We got a great guest, and I'm taking Paul's word on that because I don't think I've ever talked to him, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, this guy is amazing. By the way, first time I ever met him was literally, I mean, ever communicated one on one was yesterday on Zoom. But I've been hearing about this guy for a while, and he's every bit what I heard,
Look what Sven
and
is
then some.
proposing. It's
Yeah,
the
that's
moment
right.
is Sven trying.
Well, okay, Sven. So you've gotten SAP some free advertising. The moment is Sven, brought to you by SAP, whether they want to or not.
What a motto! What a tagline! SAP. Whether you better not that. Anyway,
No,
so before we go to our guests, something happened out at Cloud World, and luckily for me, I was able to capture that moment. We were doing our. This was actually our little. The Oracle uh, gave us a little a setup, a little stage, a little whatever you want to call that studio
yep,
for us to do our players show live from the exhibition floor at Cloud World. And so we get there and we were like, oh man, this is really cool. We actually have a real set and we've got like a cameraman and a sound person. And so I'm running around taking all these pictures and things and it was cool. And then I got this one picture. I got Paul to sit down at the desk that we are going to be doing the show from. And I think I caught like a bit of an impromptu as he was looking up. I caught a picture, and that is the expression, the exact expression
Yeah.
that I was able to capture. Now, I was really, I thought it was a really cool picture. The expression on his face was kind of priceless. And then I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to
No,
ask?
there's a monetary value to this expression. I'm charging.
Uh,
You said it was priceless. Sorry, man. There's a
okay.
fee come.
Is this
There
an
will
NFT?
be an invoice. An invoice is being sent for the use of the picture.
Is it? Oh, wait a minute. No Endermans today, Rebecca.
No, it
Sorry.
wasn't Enterman's, Rebecca. I can tell you
It's
that.
like, the picture wasn't a disappointing picture because there were no Endermans. That would be a good caption. So anyway, I asked people to provide a caption, and I came back. I think we had about 18 or 19
Yeah, 18. But I think one of
votes.
them was mine where I actually told what it was because I know exactly what I was doing.
Yeah. So I
And
thought
actually, I won't say yet, but let's just put this right in that picture.
right in that picture.
Yep.
Well, anyway, so I got a few of the responses. I thought it'd be cool to kind of walk through a couple of them. Can't do them all because there's too many, but we got a couple. This one from Paul Sweeney. After many years in the software industry, Paul is delighted to find himself back on the customer service desk talking again. How about that one? Were you ever on the
Yeah.
Were you ever on the help desk?
Never.
You were never
Not
of
one.
any
Nope. Never had any intention of being of any help either.
help? Okay, well, we'll move on. Let's see what we got next. Carl Anderson says, that's the face you make when you find that the first out of 14 selections in your parlay has lost already.
Now that's funny.
Yeah, I've never done any betting, so I don't know.
When I was a kid, I went to the Belmont racetrack was near our house, so I would go with my buddy Bennett Liebman, who was my best friend in high school, who became the head of the New York State Racing Commission, and at the same time was Mario Cuomo's attorney, who I will be also talking to tomorrow, because I talk to him every couple of weeks. But that's the only time. And by the way, Carl never went to 14 selections, man. You kidding? Wasn't. I chose winner. That was it.
Winner, dinner. There it is.
Pretty much.
All right, let's go on.
Winner, lose the money to the dinner.
Aaron Lutz. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
I never got that. I didn't get that one, I have to admit, exactly. I don't know if that expression fits that one. So, Aaron, since you know I love you and adore you, how about you comment and let us know what you meant when you said that one? I didn't quite connect.
All right, I got to go to Rebecca because she literally just sent me an email, and the email says, Paul's face looks like peas in his Halloween costume.
Peas?
Yeah, like the letter P. Your face looks
like I'm in my Halloween costume?
We're gonna need a further explanation on that one, Rebecca.
There's one direction it could go that I really don't like, right? So just so you know, Rebecca, think about
Rebecca, you might need to send some Endermans if this is going the wrong way.
Yeah, you might. There's one of three ways it could go, and one of them's really bad.
Yeah. All right. Well, in the meantime, Des Cahill, we always love hearing from Des.
One of the best ever.
Yeah.
Really.
What do you mean somebody drank all the good bourbon? Oh, well, okay.
Not bad. Although that's close. The reality is I don't actually care if other people drink all the good bourbon because I know I'm not going to drink it all. Oh, Patrick. Oh, that was a fourth way I did not even think of.
Yeah, because
wow.
So she calls Patrick P. Okay, I get it.
I thought it was you was just shortening my name. Or
thanks for the clarification.
Wow.
Okay, what do we got? Do we have any more here? Let's see. Oh, our buddy Kimberly Guillaume. Paul is thinking, what's the score? And that could have been the case because there was a Yankees playoff game going on.
In fact, inside story, I was with We had an independent analyst thing, which you and I were at with Rob Tarkoff. And I told Rob beforehand I was going to have my Major League at Bat app open on my phone while we were talking. Right. And he was fine with it. So I did. I had it sitting there. Yankees won before they went on to ignominious defeat. The Yankees won the game, and I wanted to yell out, but we were in the middle of a meeting with about 12 other, I guess 10 or 12 other analysts, so I didn't. But I can tell you what I was doing. If you want the real answer to that, go back to the picture, and I will
Wait a minute,
explain.
hold on before we do that.
All right.
Our buddy, now we haven't heard from him in a long time. I still like to refer to him as the Scorp from Hell, or
That's right, Scorp from Hell.
as I first initially thought, S Corp from
An escort from Hell. Oh, wow, that is your accounting background coming into play there.
Oh, you cannot say Dracarys in here. I see. I don't even know. Is that some sort of currency?
Don't
I
have
don't
a
know.
clue.
There's too much wood.
I don't not. That's another one. I literally don't know what he's saying.
Bob is saying, by the way, Bob typed in, how about those? You know, that would definitely be coming from a Boston fan. That one.
Oh, that's from House of the Dragon, and Game of Thrones.
Oh, really?
Dracarys is the command the Targaryens use when they want their dragons to breathe fire. Now that makes complete sense.
Okay.
Once he said that, because think about it, there's too much wood in here. You say Dracarys, dragon breathes fire, burns the place down.
Ew.
Yeah, too much wood. Okay.
Oh, okay, that's it. So we're back to Paul.
All right.
Paul's.
So go back to the picture. I'll go back to the picture. I will tell you the real reason what I was actually doing.
Bring the picture back
and then why I said there's a giant hint in the picture. So do you see that thing hanging down from the top, aka a microphone?
Yes.
I was literally trying to see what mic it was. I was trying to read the label. It was not easy to read because it was small and it wasn't as sure, right? And I could not. I was having trouble reading it. But it's literally what the picture actually looks like once you know that. It's me looking directly at that mic because I'm trying to read which one it is.
All right.
There it is.
The mystery's been solved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
What was causing that look to come across the godfather of CRM, the venerable Paul Greenberg.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Now that the mystery has been solved, and I didn't even pop up the one where people were mentioning the word bagel.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, stay away from that one. All right.
Good move.
So I think we're ready for our guest. I see him in the green room. This is where I turn it over to the venerable Paul Greenberg for the guest introduction. Take it away.
I want to how about taking the picture away first?
Well, yeah, that's true too. Here we go.
Probably a good idea. All right. So I did not meet Mr. Grad Conn until yesterday. Now, that said, he is, at least in my mind, has been semi-legendary because not only have I heard his name ever since he showed up as the chief marketing officer of PROS, but I actually got my memory jogged when he was also running marketing or part of marketing at Microsoft, right? For many years. Now, what I had heard of Mr. Conn, not related to James, spelled entirely differently, in fact, was that he was an innovative thinker. He was a visionary guy. He had a great sense of humor. He knew how to shake things up when it came to marketing. He was very much a right-brained human being. He was also a super engaging person. And to find out if that was true, being a very, very, as you well know, a very good investigative reporter, I set up an hour discussion with him. Hey, Patrick, it's good to see you, man. I want to have a chat with you soon. So, as a good investigative reporter, I set up an hour discussion with him to find out if all these rumors were true. Let's just put it this way. The discussion went 2 hours. and it was only cut off because there was other things we both had to do. Other than that, it would have gone another 10.
Is
Right?
anybody surprised by that though? I mean, really, is anybody surprised? By the way,
Well, no,
an investigative reporter. That was kind of interesting. I kind of like.
well, here's the other side of it: is he's actually even more verbose than me.
What? Are you serious?
I am dead serious. The guy can. I've never ever said this about any human being because I think I can out talk anybody, and that's like a badge of honor for me. He can out talk me.
Oh my God! This next
Mhm.
40 minutes or so is going to be.
Oh,
something.
I'll say you and I will say 5 words and just let this man go, and you will end up with one of the best discussions you ever had, and it will actually still feel like a discussion, right?
Hey,
So,
before we bring him on, I do. Patrick Trips, by the way, good to see Patrick there. His comment made me think we probably should just quickly address
oh, right.
town hall. So you want to take care of that?
Yeah. Let's address the elephant in the room, which unfortunately turned out to be an ant, right? So we were going to, as you know, yesterday, we were going to do a LinkedIn audio changing role of CMO town hall. The only downside to that was LinkedIn audio, right? It turned out to be, let's just say, not even close to ready for prime time. In fact, not even ready for late night. Okay. And I mean the 12:30 late night show, right? It's not even there. Right. So we decided let's not do this because there were so many gaps, flaws, and problems with it that it just wasn't worth the time, effort, and we knew it would not. It just wasn't adequate for generating engagement in any way, shape, or form. Shouldn't, to be perfectly blunt, I think if the consensus is close to, if not actually, it shouldn't have even been released at the level it was released. So we are going to reschedule. We're still working out the platform. I think, if I'm correct, we're leaning to Zoom, but we're not there yet. So that's it. We'll come back to you with a probably. We're going to try to do it November 16th. Can't guarantee that 100% yet, but we're working toward that. And there you have it. So if you tried to get in yesterday, then you were better than we are because we never even sent a link.
Yeah.
Right.
That was
So
a really good
yeah.
trip. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So getting back to our guests, is it time to bring them out?
Yes, it is.
All right. Welcome to the Players for the first time, actually.
Yeah.
Hello.
Here's our man, Mr. Grad Conn. How are you, sir?
I'm great. That was a super intimidating introduction, by the way.
Yes, it was. Well, the good news is nothing actually does intimidate you, and that was fairly clear yesterday too.
Well, so, the thing is, I just said everything I had to say yesterday. I really don't have much to say now. It's gonna be a really long 40 minutes coming up.
Okay, we can just yawn.
After that build up, come on.
We can just yawn together. That's all. We'll all just sit here and
yeah.
Nice how's your day going? You're gonna just.
I can already tell that he's built for engagement because he's got the Rode mic. He's got
sure. MV7.
Sure, he's got the SM7B, man.
He's got the SM. Okay.
That's the MV7. MV7. This is the
podcast. Okay. Oh, that's the MV7.
I was going to get in really close.
Oh, look, he's getting the radio voice ready and everything.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Gotta spin some tunes, kids.
Sheps.
Awesome. Well, I haven't had the pleasure to meet you before, so thanks for joining us today. I did a little perusal of your LinkedIn profile, and you've been a CMO many years at many different locations. And congrats on coming to PROS. So, I just one question I have in mind is, because you've been a CMO for a certain length of time at a number of different stops, how does that shape your approach to stepping into this CMO role with PROS, on top of the fact that the last 2 years have been the 2 years that we probably have never even seen before? And how does that shape things?
What do you mean? Last couple of years, pretty regular, right?
Yeah.
It was funny. I was doing a presentation to this group of pricing professionals at the Professional Pricing Society, and a really cool group of people, very interesting set of topics, an incredibly sophisticated category, actually. And I started off the presentation with 4 slides, right? And I was like, war, pandemic, shortages, and then inflation. I'm like, how do you like the 2020s so far? They're awesome. Right? Yeah, they're cool.
The Roaring 20s.
Well, the 1920s were, I don't know, 1920s, we got jazz, we got speakeasies, we got flappers. What did we do wrong? Like,
well, we did have prohibition.
This is the worst. Political violence, conspiracy theories, like the whole thing. I was watching Meet the Press this weekend. Oh my God. Like, it's almost like we're going through some kind of like vortex, and the stuff that people are worrying about in Congress, just like for their own personal safety now, it's just out of control. So it's, we live in interesting times, that's for sure. But, I think, so your question is, how did my previous CMO roles influence this role? Would that be a good way to summarize it?
Yeah. How does it shape your approach to going into pros here?
Well, it's interesting. I'd say that I guess the thing that's a really kind of fortunate part of my life is that everything I've done has always been different and new. So I don't have a playbook. I have sort of models and structures, and you'll probably hear that a little bit as we talk, but I don't go in and just like start like just doing a thing a certain way. And I like the intellectual stimulation of understanding what this particular problem or what this particular opportunity represents. And PROS is a new thing for me. So I've worked as CMO of my own startup. That was super fun. I love that one. That was the best. Like, approvals were speedy. My money, my company. And it worked out okay. And I've been CMO at a startup that was focused in the loyalty space called points.com. Did that for a few years. It was a lot of fun. Very interesting challenge there of building an exchange. So it was very much heavy demand gen consumer focus. Then I worked at Microsoft and ended up being CMO for Microsoft US. That was super interesting because it was about managing multiple channels. We had an SMB program, we had a mid-channel program, we had a large enterprise program, we had a strategic partner program, we had a partner program. It was just a very, very robust set of motions that you had to manage and sort of juggle all the time. And then at Sprinkler, where we were running sort of a large enterprise sales program, and I'd known Sprinkler for a long time. So that was a really fun assignment as well. What was interesting for me about PROS, and the question I kept asking them as I went through the interview process, was, with everything that I'm learning about this company, great culture, maybe one of the best CEOs I've ever met. And I'm not the only person who says that. I mean, tons of people say this about Andres.
I say it.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing. World-class science, tons of PhDs, really heavy science, very much a US-based team that's building everything. Incredible partnership with Microsoft, one of Azure's top customers, 4 trillion calculations a year, 4 trillion transactions a year moving through the system. Like, with all the stuff that we do, and we're a reasonable sized company, we're a public company, you can look up the numbers, but like around 300 million in revenue. My question to the company is, why aren't we 3 billion in revenue? Right? Like, why isn't it much, much larger? And so the problem I think that I'm sort of trying to solve here is that I think that the company has almost over niched itself into a specific area and has a promise and benefit that could benefit so many more companies, but they don't hear about it, or they can't hear it, because if you say pricing, people are like, we don't have a pricing department, or pricing's like those folks down there. And so what I've always been fascinated is I've been fascinated by this category creation motion. And, think bigger has kind of been part of it. Amp it up, the whole Frank Slootman motion.
And more.
Yeah, like the ServiceNow motion, the Snowflake motion. Like, if you read Frank's history, it's kind of like, and then they went in and expanded the addressable market, right? And I loved what Qualtrics did. Qualtrics was a survey company, sort of stuck in the same zone as Medallia and SurveyMonkey, and they redefined themselves around customer experience, kind of own customer experience. Their tech wasn't that different between the day before they said they were a CX company and the day after they said they were a CX company, but the way that people viewed them was very different. And since then, the tech has sort of kind of followed that vision. And so I thought there was a really interesting Qualtrics style motion here to bring what is amazing technology to a lot more companies. And so what we're doing is we're redefining ourselves from being a pricing company to being a profit optimization company. And we have many examples of companies who've used us to manage both cost and price, so both sides of the margin equation, to drive gross margin. And if you talk to a CFO about profit, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's important to me.
That's my department.
And it starts to change the kind of the roadmap discussion we have, because what does a unified profit optimization suite look like? What are all the different things that need to be digitized in the back office to help companies drive organic margin from within their existing operations? And when you start to think about it that way, it gets to be kind of super exciting. And so that's actually why I'm here. I've told the team that my plan was to stay here for 7 years, because that's how long I think it's going to take to run this motion, because these category creation things don't happen overnight. And I've been here for 6 months now, so I'm at 6.5 years left. And I said this to someone the other day, I'm 1/12 of the way through this already. We got to keep moving faster. They're like, God, stop the countdown. Oh my God, I'm feeling the pressure. I know. Keep moving. Anyway, that's why I'm here.
So, I mean, look, I as we discussed yesterday, I mean, I know PROS also, I'm really well. I mean, I've advised them for 7 years. To your point, their culture is extraordinary. They're as far as they're over niche, so to speak. They were the category leader for that, by a long shot.
They own
but
pricing.
Again, right? Yeah, pricing, and their market was always small, right? And they acquired Chameleon CPQ for CPQ as a feature, which always impressed me when Andre said that. And that's still a small addressable market. I don't know what the addressable market literally is for profit optimization, but it's got to be pretty big. Just by the first word alone will sort of make it interesting to a lot of people in a lot of ways. But then comes the sort of next part. I mean, one of the things that I remember having a discussion with PROS way back was and it actually showed up at Outperform that same year, was when Stelia Fleischacker was still CMO, was PROS. I always said, look, you have to be more theatrical. And then came the pandemic, and then Don Sherman, who's the CTO of Pega, was on the Playaz, and he made a really interesting point without prompting, which was, well, we had to be theatrical, but now we have to be more cinematic, which is really an interesting point and actually really, really accurate in terms of if we're going to live in a hybrid universe. We have to take as much from the world of movie making, so to speak, and film as we did from the world of theater, even though that's still applicable too. But the idea really is be more engaging, be more right brain, show more of a sense of humor. I know you've done some things toward that, which I think would be really, I think people would love to hear about it. And secondly, I'm kind of curious as to the longer term, since you've got, 6 years, 11 months, and 12 days left, right?
No, 6.5 years. I'm already 6 months in.
Oh, no. 6 years. No. Oh, that's right. 6 years. I'm sorry. 6 years, 5 months, and 11 days. 6 years, 5 months, and 11 days left.
Yeah.
And 9 hours and 3 minutes. So, since you have that time, though, what's the long-term strategy for building out that kind of, if you agree, building out the theatrical / cinematic engagement. So can you talk to both what you're doing now, because you are doing something really, let's say, adorable, in a good word. Good word would be what I would, in a good way.
Adorable. I
Yeah,
like that. Okay.
it's kind
I'll
of the
take
right word
adorable.
for it. No, it's the right word. It really is.
I'm often called adorable, so I think it's
Wow.
okay. It's a good word.
Wow.
Just go like this, right? So show the dimple, right? So what's the strategy in addition to what are you doing now?
Well, so there's like a overall communication strategy and positioning strategy. So we'll talk about that for a second, and then there's the sort of the tactical aspect of how you make that happen, right? And I think you're sort of referring to some of the tactical stuff that we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
So I think step one is you do have to first say, what is the market that I want to play in, and what is the reason for our existence on the planet, and what value do we bring to the planet? There's a really interesting stat: 90% of public company annual reports cite gross margin improvement as an area that the company's focused on. 90%.
Wow.
So I love that, because that is a big number, and that's of all public companies. And if you look at what people are doing in this area, even in pricing, which has been a sort of a digitized area now for quite a long time, 84% of pricing professionals are still using spreadsheets and, post-it notes and Outlook and, emails and stuff to manage pricing. That's in the mature part of the profit margin story. Most of this stuff is still being handled very much in a manual way. So I actually think that this idea of profit optimization, which goes to things like how you price, how you manage costs, how you manage rebates, those are kinds of things, how you manage special contracts, how you manage special offers, like all these different, how you manage contract creation, contract lifetimes, like all these different pieces that are part of it are all in these kind of non-digitized formats. And I think we may have sort of, I don't know if sort of stumbled is not quite the right word, but I think maybe discovered that this is like the last area in the back office that hasn't been digitized. And so that's kind of the starting point, right? So I'm super duper excited about this mission of helping companies drive organic margin growth. And if you think about, if you're a company these days, the idea of profitable growth has really become important. We always have, it'll come back again, but there's always these stages of just grow at any cost, but those don't last long and they don't come very often. But generally what companies want to do is drive profitable growth. And in order to really do that well, you've got to drive organic margin growth from within your existing businesses. And so that means you need to find ways of getting more revenue and lowering the costs within the businesses you have. And if you do that well, and if you kind of constantly build that margin within your existing business, your business is healthy and viewed very positively by the street. So the best way to increase your stock price is to drive profitable growth. And so I just love sitting at the nexus of that, and no one else is doing it. Like, we're the category creators here. Now, there's lots of people say, oh, we have a profits this, or we do this here, or we do some cost management here. But the idea of a unified platform to manage profitable growth, that this is the category creation moment. So that's kind of special. Now, when you sort of say, oh, great, okay, awesome. But if you just say that, sometimes it's enough. But often you've really got to try to break through. And so I am a consumer packaged goods marketer by training. I started my career and spent my first decade at Procter & Gamble. And my dad was a madman on Madison Avenue. And I kind of grew up, I think pretty much the only thing my dad and I ever talked about was advertising. And so that world for me is a very familiar world. And so I'm trying to, this is something I've never really done before, but don't tell Andres. But I'm trying. I've always had this like, why is it that in B2B we tend to talk to people differently than we would talk to them in B2C? Right? Why is it that we take a human being who plays Xbox in the evenings, or who goes to movies, or who has families and children and is like a normal human being? Why do we talk to them they're like a business robot when we're in B2B? What if we were to take the principles of packaged goods marketing and apply them to the B2B world and create an almost myopically focused message around this idea of profit optimization? Right? So that's the it sounds a little bit more complicated than I mean it to be, but that's kind of what I'm trying to do. Now, I'm also a huge fan of advertising history, and so let's not get started there because we'll run out of time real fast. But I love advertising history. I have shelves of books. I would guess I may have every advertising book ever written, and from Hank Seiden, who wrote a book that only had a couple thousand copies, to David Ogilvy. I've got them all, okay? And I've read and I've got everything that anyone's published on any of these things. Bill Bernbach famously had a book that he was writing for years and years and years, and he had speeches, and he would kind of basically preview the book in these speeches. And he was famous for these incredible speeches. And people are like, this is going to be the greatest book on advertising ever written. And then he died.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And his widow and one of his creative partners wrote the book and released that book. And they made a couple hundred copies. I have one of those. So I got a lot of this stuff. And I have because of B2B's immaturity in the advertising space, I've sort of a second theory, which is I don't need to be exactly where packaged goods is today. In fact, it's probably maybe useful to go a tiny bit back in history and borrow some of the techniques of kind of classic packaged goods marketing. So things like continuing characters, right? And then, obviously there's going to have to be some modern twist to it, but continuing characters are something that you don't see as much in a lot of packaged goods marketing. You see it in some things like Flow, and there's the progressive folks do it. Geico's got it. Like there's some of that stuff going on.
First two that always come to mind.
Yeah, but Charlie's Starkist tuna thing, that stuff's not as common as it used to be, right? But it's very uncommon in B2B. So we decided to create a continuing character, and so it didn't kind of come whole cloth. Like we kind of had to feel our way into it a little bit, but we ended up creating something called the Profit Intelligence Agency, the PIA, and we've created the PIA as this alter ego to PROS. So the PROS brand character is sort of a friendly, nerdy quality. It's the person you want to have come over to help you with your homework. That's kind of how you think about PROS. And the PIA is, you ever seen Life on Mars? Great TV show.
Yeah, my God, yeah.
Yeah, right. There's a British version of it, which is much better than the American version. But Life on Mars had this, the character is a cop, hit his head, wakes up in the 1970s and has to make his way in a 1970s world. And so I think Life on Mars meets Life on Mars meets this group of people whose one goal in life is to find people who are really making a lot of money, like a lot of profit, and try to understand how they're doing it. And what they've figured out is that there's this company called PROS that is somehow at the center of these really successful profit-making enterprises, and they want to crack the code on how PROS is doing it. And so we've had one video where they interrogate myself and one of my teammates. We have another one which is a little bit more brand character development, where they're trying to figure out the story behind it. We've got some very cool stuff coming up very soon, and it also sort of solves another problem I have, which I'll get to in a second. But it creates this kind of fun sort of alter ego piece. And I don't want to say anything negative about competitors as PROS voice, because it just wouldn't be right. That sort of friendly nerd who helps with your computer homework won't say bad things about people, but the PIA can. And so I can actually have two voices as I kind of go to market, which is very fun. I'm having a blast with it.
Well,
The other thing
who's your partner in that one? The one who's like on your side, woman?
so I mean, who's in the video with me?
Yeah, the one.
Nadine Piter. Nadine is, and the first one is Nadine. So Nadine is my VP of product marketing, and that first video was just us trying to like play this game of being interrogated. At the time that we shot that video, if you look at it carefully, you'll realize that we hadn't even conceived of the PIA yet. All we'd conceived of is that we had this secret that we didn't want to reveal, and someone was trying to get it out of us.
Well, you guys were actually kind of funny with the way you were interacting with each other. I mean,
Nadine and I have a great energy. There's no question.
Yeah, well, it was actually genuinely funny with your expressions. I'll say that.
No, it worked out well. That whole thing we shot in 4 hours in St. Louis.
Wow.
We flew in, shot it, flew out. It was like it was kind of like it accidentally was pretty good. The second video, which is the same actor that interviewed us or interrogated us, but he never appeared on camera. And we added a second character named Tony. So it's Ted and Tony. That one kind of digs into more what the PIA is. And then that one, Tiffany Robertson, who leads my SDR team, is in that with me. And I probably won't be in all of them, but just right now, while it's still young and you got to keep the shoots kind of fresh, I'm trying to sort of kind of shepherd it a little bit. But over time, I'm going to have like almost everyone in the company run through one of these videos. So that'll be fun. But there's this really super duper duper tactical thing that I think actually is sort of the genesis of how we got there. And my coaching, I was talking to someone who was a little bit younger the other day. My coaching is sometimes like you don't have to have the whole idea. Sometimes like just start somewhere, and sometimes the ideas emerge. And the idea the problem we had is that we have a lot of customers who don't want us to use their name. Like we can't say that XYZ company uses us because we're viewed as such a competitive advantage. They don't want their competitors to know that they're using us because they don't want their competitors to use us. It's quite an interesting challenge. I've never actually run into such a significant issue. And we generally are delivering 200 to 500 basis point improvements in margin. And the product typically pays out within 6 months, always less than a year. There are customers who've installed PROS and pay the investment out in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it's just basically free from there on, right? And so I found out about this problem. I was like, initially everyone's like, we got to figure out how to convince them to sort of let us talk about them. I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen, because like I know what happens when someone says they don't want their logo used. They don't want their logo used. So I decided to lean into it and say, hey, we're so good, so powerful, that we're like a best kept secret. No one wants to talk about us because we're such a competitive advantage. And so I built this sort of idea of best kept secret around that. And that's what Nadine and I are getting interrogated about. And that's essentially what that first video is. Yeah. And then after that video was shot and it sort of turned out pretty well, we started asking questions like, well, who is interrogating us? Like, who was that, right? And maybe it's an agency. And it took a while to get to PIA and all that kind of stuff. I will say that I should, before we get too far into this, the agency we're working with is Scorch. And, people in the B2B space who've been like in content marketing for a while know Scorch really well. They did all the original Marketo definitive guides. They do all the LinkedIn stuff. They're kind of one of the leaders and originators of content marketing in the B2B space. And they're based in St. Louis. Chris Bueller is the CEO there. And Chris and I go way back. I had found him and hired him when I was at Microsoft. And so I kind of tapped Chris on the shoulder when I started and said, hey, could we do something together? So the combo of kind of me bringing some sort of this theory stuff and just searching my way into it, and Chris and his like sort of unbridled creativity has been a really good combo, and it's a great partnership. So that's kind of how we got here.
I actually wrote a Marketo definitive guide years
Did you
ago.
really?
Yes,
Okay,
I
but
was
I
on. It
use
was
those to
on.
teach my team how to do marketing automation. They're
Well,
great.
I mean, I knew Phil Fernandez. It was back in those days, and I knew I wrote. The Eloqua used to write their own versions of that too, and I did
Right.
one or two of those too. But back in the day, that was
Those
I
are days
hadn't even
gated
thought
content.
of.
I don't even gate stuff anymore. I mean, I think gating is ridiculous now.
Yeah.
But I mean, I introduced that, brought it out, loaded it in, and now I don't believe in it anymore because people will not put their name down anymore, and so
Right.
just putting gates up is a way of making
I
sure
was a
people don't.
Maoist. I don't believe that anymore either. So
Yeah, well, I think you have to be like only Martin Luther could sort of put the proclamation on the door of the church, right? I think you have to have gone to church to be able to like reject it, right? You can't just like you have to practice it before you can say it's wrong.
I have to say, I appreciate the history lesson that's taking place right now as we go through this. We went to Martin Luther. Are we going to get back to like Saint Augustine, or are we going to
I
go
hope
back?
so.
You know,
He was your last name without the two N's. That was saying Augustine, former Khan, right?
wow.
So it's true. What can I say? A reformed convict, Saint
Hey,
Augustine.
just a quick question. It feels like we had this conversation with our buddy Anand Tucker um, about how it feels like the role of marketing they're being called on to do more than ever before, not just to manage advertising spend, but be a part of the revenue kind of discussion and the growth kind of discussion. Are you seeing that? Do you feel like you're looked upon differently today as a CMO than you were a few years ago?
So I agree that the idea of a revenue marketer, that trend is a real thing. I've always considered myself a revenue marketer, and I'll tell you why in a second. I basically measure my output by one metric, which is pipeline and closed won. So I don't care how many TQLs I generate or AQLs or MQLs or all the other L's and Q's and M's. We'll look at some of those internal metrics, but at the end of the day, I think where you get in trouble in marketing is when you sort of declare victory on an internal metric like MQL that doesn't convert. And so, our job is to help sales become successful and effective. So I think if you do that and you get that sort of mindset, it keeps life pretty simple. I am a believer that the SDR team needs to be part of marketing and is that kind of a core interface between the marketing scale programs and what the sales folks are trying to do on an account basis. We are making a bit of a shift inside pros where there was kind of a demand gen engine set up, but it was pulling in a lot of fish that we couldn't eat. And we're switched now to an account-based marketing approach, and that's been kind of fun. But the shift from inbound to outbound has been a bit dramatic for some folks, and I know it's been tough on the team, but they're responding well and starting to see the outcomes already. For me, so the very first book I ever read, and a book I don't know how many copies I have had of it and have of it, is the very first book written on advertising. My dad gave it to me when I was probably 3 or 4. I was an early reader, and it's called Scientific Advertising. It's by Claude Hopkins. Do you know Claude Hopkins?
I didn't read
No,
that.
I know Claude Akins. He was a great actor.
All right. Well, and I do have a hand puppet named Hopkins, but not with me today. So if you ever make the mistake of inviting me back, we can do it from my Houston office. Hopkins can be
Well,
part
we
of that.
will ask a certain question at the end that will determine your fate. But that's
Anyway, so Claude Hopkins, he invented orange juice. Just like he invented the feminine hygiene category. The very first political ads were done by Claude Hopkins. Claude Hopkins invented modern advertising as we know it. There's actually a great book called The Man Who Sold America, and Claude Hopkins is sort of part of that book, but it's part of the sort of the evolution of advertising from just a media buying entity, which is what J. Walter Thompson That was his big insight, which is like, hey, I'll have one room buying ads for everybody, to, hey, what if the creative was better? Would that not sell more product? And if we sold more product, we'd sell more media. And so that evolution of the business is fascinating. We can get into that some other time. But that was the very first book I read in advertising, and I've read it, I can't even tell you how many times. And when you read that book, Claude Hopkins talks incessantly about using advertising to sell products. Like, it's all about selling. And back then, this is 1920s and 30s, they used coupons and response codes, and they would, have people fill out coupons and send stuff in. The way he invented orange juice is that the California orange growers were a customer or a client, and they were trying to figure out how to sell more oranges. And Claude Hopkins came up with the idea of getting Americans to start drinking orange juice for breakfast. Like, that was his idea. And the way he implemented it is he didn't sell oranges, and he didn't say you should drink orange juice. What he did is he invented the glass juicer, like the classic glass juicer that we've all seen. That was invented by an advertising agency, and they sold them for a nickel a piece. And then they talked about the health benefits of orange juice in the morning. And so they knew exactly how much they were selling and how much they were pushing out. And so I was always heavily influenced by that, because I've always thought, if advertising can't measure its output, then what good is it doing? And so I've always thought of myself in a revenue marketing context. And I've always thought of advertising and marketing as something that's a business building activity, not a tactical activity of buying media or something. I guess the industry, I think what really happened is that, I'm a huge Bill Bernbach fan, but I think he was widely misinterpreted. And I think the creative revolution in the 1960s and the sort of advent of TV resulted in creating several generations of marketers who couldn't have like pointed accountability to what they were doing. I mean, you had sort of, like Wonderman, like he had the direct marketing motion, and he invented that, obviously. But and I got a chance to meet him once, which was pretty cool. But that was always, direct marketing is always viewed as kind of really weird, ugly stepchild or something. And the real advertising industry had this kind of low accountability model with brand perception and stuff as being the measurements. And so I think over time, what happened is marketers lost touch with the idea of them being salespeople. And whenever I start with a new team, I always start with this deck. I'm with this team recently, and I always say, I want to help you, work with you and help me tell me what you think marketing is.
You don't start with the 4 slides?
No. And so I'll say marketing is, and everyone gives me a different definition, and it's amazing. There's like 50 definitions of it. People all talk about it, but people typically will talk about it tactically. Buying advertising, for example. And then I'll click and I'll say marketing is selling. And I'll lose people at that point. There's a lot of people who'll be like, I don't want to be in sales. I'm not a seller. Those people don't work well on my team, right? And then I add one more thing. So marketing is selling, at scale. Right. And, a lot of the people in the 1920s and 30s, when they were implementing advertising campaigns, they were measuring it against the effectiveness of door-to-door salespeople, right? And sort of like the idea being, if you can sell something through the newspaper, can you do that more effectively than selling it door-to-door, which is a very effective method at the time. There's a guy named John E. Kennedy who worked at Claude Hopkins, and he actually probably has the best definition of advertising. It's a little old-fashioned because it's gendered, and it uses a channel that's not as popular anymore. But just imagine for a second, it's 1930, and he defines advertising as salesmanship in print. Right now, obviously, it's not just print anymore, but the idea of you're a seller through a scale channel is really what marketing is. But I think people, for some reason, I don't know, lost touch with that. I don't completely understand why, but it happened.
So what is that? Okay, so with that perspective, go back a little bit from early question, which was, where do you see generally, not for pros specifically, but where do you see the next 4 or 5 years going in terms of how you sell at scale via channel. What channels? How? What's that mean in terms of institutionalization? What's that mean in terms of form? What do you do?
Well, that's an awesome question. And what's actually
No.
kind of, I've noticed this recently. There was a motion in, I'll just stay with B2B for a second right now, but there's a motion in a lot of B2B SaaS companies to build a direct sales force. That's a very expensive motion unless you have a very high ACV. And we're actually seeing a lot of those get disassembled right now. And a lot of entire teams, like entire SDR teams, et cetera, just being separated as people go to reseller motions and more channel sales motions. And I actually think that the thing that's going to happen in the SaaS B2B space is that the SIs, particularly the local and industry SIs, are going to start exploding. And they tend to have a more trusted relationship than the vendors do with the customers because they're often running infrastructure and systems. And I think getting more tightly connected to that community is going to make a big difference. And then what you have to do is so now you've got sort of a marketing challenge into the SI community, into those channels. And then you still have to have sort of the vendor awareness challenge into the customers themselves. And how people are going to be playing that game will be really interesting. I think very difficult.
What's the format going to look like, or the formats
Format
of this new, let's say, use of channel/media? For example, Jason Wong, who's the analyst at Gartner, has this concept which is called multi-experience. Now, they also have a concept of total experience with Gartner, which I think is more like blah blah blah. But multi-experience has legs, and he's basically saying, look, the way people are going to be engaging along their journeys is not channel, it's modality, right? Which includes channels among its things. It's not omni-channel, but it's multimodal, right? And that goes to a whole other level. This goes to conversational AI. It goes to, it goes to touch. It goes to the senses, really, in addition to voice and so on. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, obviously we see the millennial shift now, because millennials are going to be running the world. Well, they're sort of beginning to run it now, and certainly in business, they're already.
Well, I hope they do, because everyone else is going to die, so someone's going to run it.
Well, thanks a lot.
Well, I mean, that's sort of the way it works. I don't want to burst your bubble or anything, but it's not going to happen.
Well, then I'm retiring right now to enjoy my life. I'll see you guys later. Right. So given that though, and you maybe have 3-4 years before it's just pretty much a done deal for millennials running the world, so to speak. How and they consume differently, right? So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, right. Well, that's an awesome question. And I will say that there's a great Bill Gates quote, which is, we always tend to overestimate the amount of change that's going to occur in 2 years. And we always tend to underestimate the amount of change that occurs in a decade. And so I do think we're probably in a decade-long sort of transition. But the way I've heard it, Paul, and tell me if you agree with this, this is something I'm kind of playing with right now from a tactical ad campaign standpoint, is that there is this trend called the consumerization of B2B.
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
I'm sure you've heard that, right? Okay. And what we're seeing is kind of part of that is that if you think about how people buy today, like just basic items like pens and toilet paper and toys and stuff like that, people are self-serving. They go to a marketplace or they go to Amazon or something like that. They buy on their own. They don't need a salesperson. They're not necessarily going into physical stores, or if they do go into physical stores, they're often doing it as a way of sample shopping. Like, I want to see what it looks like in person. I want to understand how it feels, etc. And then I may go buy it online anyway. So self-serve has become something that we're getting pretty comfortable with in the consumer world. It's not 100%, but it's I think an inevitability. In B2B, it's not really that close to even a minor percentage. And what's fascinating to me is that, why is B2B not as self-serve as B2C? And so I think you're gonna see that change occur. And I do think that the whole reseller and sort of channel motion will actually force, and I don't mean it in a bad way, kind of like forcing function, will force companies to make the products easier to self-serve and easier to buy, because essentially a third party is selling it and integrating it and making it happen. And I do think you're going to see, and you'll see this already, like the B2B buyer journey is very rarely to the website.
Right.
There's a great Gartner stat, and I think it's 64% of all first-time visitors to your B2B website, first-time visitors to your B2B website, have already decided to buy the product, to buy it, right?
Yep.
And so what's going on there? Well, they've gone to Gartner, they've gone to Forrester, they've gone to Constellation, they've gone to G2 Crowd, they've gone to Capterra, they've gone to all these different sites that exist out there, and all these third-party review sites to sort of make their decisions, understand the category, understand who the leaders are, understand who the players are, and then they kind of come to sort of get in contact with somebody, get someone in sales to call them, right? Which is so funny, because a lot of B2B websites, it's actually kind of hard to figure out how to actually get in contact with sales. And that's generally speaking, the most important thing that people go to the site for. And so that, I think that's a good sign that we're moving down that path. But what happens right now is that people have got a buying journey which is outside of the company's bubble. Then they intersect with the company, and then they get forced into this sort of direct sales, personal phone call, face-to-face model, which doesn't allow them to self-serve, makes it more complicated, makes it more difficult, is an expensive motion anyway. And I think B2B companies are going to have to think about, hey, people are coming to me on their own, not because of my website. I've got to make sure that I'm easy to buy, purchase, install, and work with. And that's the probably decade-long journey we're on right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow. It's already a little past the top of the hour. It's been such a great conversation. I had a comment come in from one of our listeners / buddies.
Okay.
He asked a question. God, I almost don't want to ask this. He says, since you are, a CMO and your name is Grad, do the people that work under you, are they called undergrads?
Wow, I've never heard that before. That's very funny. I think
that
that's
actually
very funny.
is really good.
That is funny.
Yeah.
I would never, ever in a billion years ever want that to ever happen, because no, I hate that. I mean, I always sit on my team's floor. I reasonably unassuming office. When I ran my own companies, I always sat next to the photocopier out in the hallways.
Well,
The idea, but I will say a funny thing that people do with my name, and my Grad is actually my full name. It's not short for anything. It's my mother's maiden name. And my parents they weren't hippies, but they were pretty progressive, and they kind of wanted, it's also my middle name. And their initial idea was to kind of have like double-barreled names for all the kids. So we're all going to have the middle name Grad, and then my father's maiden name was Conn, and so it was everyone became a form of double-barreled name, and I got this first name, which I hate. And so, but in the end, the first name is so ridiculous that they ended up calling me Grad, and the whole plan broke down. But the one thing that you can probably gather from the way I talk is that I do enjoy history and advertising history and stuff. And so within a reasonably short period of time, people that work with me create a little folder on their desktop called Grad School.
See, that's the thing. And those
never heard
those
undergrad,
of your,
but I definitely
but
grad
think
school.
those of the ones you mentor are grad students.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm glad you like the joke, but because the person didn't have the courage to put it in the public comment section, I'm not saying who it's from.
All
So
right.
there,
Okay.
you should have just come out and said it. I'm not gonna say it, but it's a pretty.
I had a guess who I thought it was from, but it's not something. In retrospect, I think the one I guessed would have been able to ask. Wouldn't have occurred to him.
Well, if he wants to take credit in the comment section, let him do it. But I'm not shouting you out because you didn't have the courage to do it. All right, great conversation. One last question, and as I kind of alluded to before, As great as this conversation has been, the wrong answer here, we will never talk to you again. Not to put any pressure on you or anything, but that's just the way it is. So do you have a favorite NFL team?
A favorite NFL team?
Yes.
Uh, yes. I mean, I'm going to caveat this a little carefully, though, because I am Canadian, as you can probably hear. And so I'm a lifelong Toronto Maple Leafs fan, which is,
Right.
path
Hockey.
of sorrow and misery that it really shouldn't. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not right. But I do have a favorite NFL team.
Okay.
Didn't grow up with the NFL, and was not really kind of
You
part
grew
of
up
my
with the CFL.
Yes, sort of,
Hamilton
but
Tiger Cats. Woo, woo.
yeah, I mean, just
The
football in
Argonauts.
Canada is not a big thing, right? But
That's right. Toronto
my
Argonauts.
dad taught me football, like taught me how football works. The season that the Miami Dolphins had the perfect season, and Larry Zonka and all, okay.
Yeah.
And I was, I was tiny, and I was like a little kid listening to this, and my dad was teaching me how the game worked and everything. And I thought the Miami Dolphins were the coolest, best team. And so I have since then been on a secondary path of sorrow and misery of being a Miami Dolphins fan. And but I will say I didn't grow up with any kind of baseball in my life. In fact, I've never actually physically seen a baseball game. I've been at a couple at doing an event, but I've never been at a game watching a game.
I'm going to have to correct that.
I know. People keep telling me keep threatening me to take me to a game, but I now work very significant amount of time in Houston, and I have learned that the Houston Astros is
you really don't want to go there.
Really good team. And apparently they're in this thing called the World Series. And they're also apparently called the Stros. And so I have decided to become a Houston Astros fan.
That's currently let me explain something, Grad. That's currently in discussion for being the second wrong answer you could give. Just so you know that.
Yeah,
given that I am a diehard Yankees fan.
Yankees. I have heard of them. Right? That's a New Jersey team, I think.
Yeah, fair enough.
All of a sudden, Brad, you're this is going kind of downhill here.
You know what? The only thing you earned at this point is one further appearance on the show, and then we'll convene and discuss. We'll convene and discuss. Right. The whole thing and decide whether,
because the direction you're taking this in is we might not ever see you ever again.
the wrong answer is the New England Patriots for football.
Yeah, that's the absolute
wrong answer for baseball is not officially yet, but heading to officially the Houston Astros.
Really?
So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, well, we'll see.
Don't mind. I've forgiven them for cheating, but I have not forgiven them for never admitting it and throwing it in the entire league's faces because they're arrogant little boy twits, right?
But how do you really feel, Paul? I'm not sure. I'm not getting a really.
To their credit, they to show you how classless the team is. They beat the crap out of us during the ALCS, and there was no question.
Huh.
Celebrating on the field at Yankee Stadium, no problem. Pulling out a broom to indicate sweep 2 years ago, 2-year-old babies on the field.
That's savage.
Well, it's not savage, it's classless, right? Okay. And they are. I've been to Astros games at the stadium with pros. I've gone there twice.
Yeah, right.
Pros.
Okay, makes sense. I get that. Okay.
Stadium was fun. Didn't hate the Astros at that point. But they've acted like such a bunch of clueless babies that that's the part I can't stand. Again, better team than the Yankees.
But it's such a cool name. It's like such a space age.
You know what the original name was? The Houston Colts. And it was not even that. It was I am not joking. It was the Houston Colt 45. So they were named after a combination.
I can see why they changed that name.
Yeah, well, it was not a gun and a beer, right? It was malt liquor. Right, well, it was a malt liquor called Colt 45.
They're shooting it up. Nothing like having a little beer.
Yeah, it was a gun and a
beer
malt
guns,
liquor.
America. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
Houston Colt 45s, and in 1962 is when they were founded, and they had one of my favorite players, Jimmy Wynn.
Yeah.
Love that
So
guy.
anyway,
Huh.
Grad, let us know when you want to invite us to a Houston Astros game.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
no, I'll go. I'll go with my Yankee
Well,
outfit.
I think at some point, I mean, my team has been sort of hoping I'll become a Strohs fan, and
You
so
might want to warn them that the analyst community is against it.
I think if I kind of show up one day with the jersey or whatever, then maybe I can get invited to a game, and we can all go together, and then you can mock them, and I can cheer them, and we'll all end up as friends.
It's okay if
Oh,
you want to root for a bunch of classless babies. That's up to you.
Okay, okay.
and on that note, we've never ended a show on classless babies before, but why not do it now? So, on
Yeah.
behalf of Grad Conn, the newly minted Astros fan, apparently, I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
I'm
We
Grad
are the
Conn.
players. We are CRM, and we many approves this message apparently.
That's
So
right.
we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.